But that's the road. After the talk, we're going to have a live demonstration, kind of a walk through the workflow. And we also have room for 4 or 5 folks to do a live hands-on demo out of the Rap7 builds. We have a bunch of the Rap7 team. We're out there hanging out. The Metasploit development team here, and happy to walk you through actually owning a bunch of targets and playing with the product. So if you have any questions, feel free to yell at me anytime. I'm going to get through probably the first chunk of this in about 10 minutes, and then we'll go into kind of the nitty-gritty details. I'm not going to address the open source versus commercial or the really detailed points of 3.4.0. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. A lot of that's already available on the blog, and the community FAQ and some other items we've already posted. So if you're looking for more of a detailed explanation about how this product ties into the open source Metasploit framework and how the commercial versus open source split works, look at the blog post, look at the community back. Hopefully it's pretty clear how we're doing this, why I think this is going to be a model that'll work for everybody. So to get started. The agenda. First thing we do is talk about the Metasploit project itself, kind of the state of it since the acquisition, what we've been doing, our growth, some kind of highlights since October. Then we're talking about Metasploit Express, which is the first commercial product we announced today. Do a quick demo of Metasploit Express, top-down workflow demo. Of course, it's a live demo with the machine running like 15 VMs on it, so things could crash, go horribly wrong. In that case, we've got screenshots. We've got live demos outside that should work like that. And finally, a comparison sheet of like Metasploit open source versus Metasploit Express. A comparison sheet of Metasploit Express versus Metasploit free version to give you an idea of kind of how those products align and what things they do, what things don't do relative to each other. To start, first off, the Rap7 team is now 6 full-time people. We've got 5 of them here today. One of them is a holdout and has some kids at home he couldn't leave behind, so we understand why he's not here. But we've got 6 full-time folks working just on the Metasploit project, entirely new department within Rap7. So there's no kind of, we're not pulling from the engineering team, we're not pulling from QA, we actually have our own department, our own development team. Most of these folks, 5 of them now, live in Austin, Texas, and that's where the team is currently located. The headquarters, of course, is here in Boston, and our engineering shop is in LA, but the Metasploit development team is mostly centered around Austin, Texas. We have 3 remote contractor teams, so these are the folks who help us out with things like exploit development, interpreter development, payloads. We're actually paying money for folks who work directly on the open source source stream, with no correlation, no licensing, no funny business in terms of how we pay those folks or where the end result is. So you look at things like a lot of the interpreter changes, a lot of the payload changes, we're actually paying contractors to work on open source code full-time as part of just what we do with Rap7. And of course, we have support from every other team at Rap7 as well, from sales, pre-sales, support, community, engineering. Everybody involved with Rap7 is helping out with the Metasploit project in some way or another. A lot of times we'll have folks who are on the Nexpo side actually recommending that Metasploit as a test product to validate the exploits being used by the Nexpo scanner. So we think it's a really good fit within Rap7, and the whole company's kind of pulling together to make sure this product succeeds, and we don't do anything just terrible and sell our soul or anything like that. Like, the whole company really is on board with the vision that we have. On the community development side, things are a little bit different. What we found is after the acquisition, we had a couple of long-term contributors who were very, F the man types who decided not to contribute afterwards. And we're like, that's your decision. We don't understand why you're doing it because the company model hasn't really changed. Instead of being Metasploit LLC, it was Rap7 LLC. And that's the only real difference after the acquisition. That and the funding and everything else behind it. We had a couple of folks who walked away after that. What surprised us, though, is we actually had twice as many people come back immediately afterwards saying, now that you're part of a big company, I can contribute. Like, why did this matter before? Like, we thought we were okay before, but no, apparently being part of Rap7 gave these folks a reason to contribute code. And I felt better about long-term commitments and long-term project stability. So we actually, it's been a net win overall. We've actually been getting a lot more contributors the last couple of we're really pushing the project forward. Metasploit has always been evolving based on what customers and users and actual pen testers, people in the field want. I mean, we get a request for a new feature, we generally get it in within a day or two. That's just how we work, and that's what we do and why we do it. So we've been pretty happy with the response so far, and we're happy that we have 10 external contributors who are pretty frequently adding new features. We've been doing tons of third-party integration. I mean, while some commercial products have integrated us, we've actually been doing a lot of real integration with other products, even ones that compete with Rap7's main business, which is Nexpos. And that's just how the product operates. We're not going to blacklist any particular commercial product because of how they stand in terms of the business relationship with Rap7. So the Metasploit framework, we're about 400,000 lines of code before the acquisition, and as of now, 4 or 5 months after the acquisition itself, we've gone up by at least 100,000 lines of code. but no matter how you count it, it's at least 100,000 lines. This is the graph from olo.net, which you can look up yourself and look at the stats. You can see this giant bump right here at the end is when the acquisition happened, and the kind of tapered off here is our preparing for the Express release. So we're going to get back on full-time Express development with 3.4.0 after the conference. But you can see we've a huge noticeable bump in terms of development speed. Since the release, we used to do releases about once per year. Every 12 months, we have a new release come out. Since Rap7 acquired the project, we've done 4 releases, 1 major and 3 points. We plan on doing the 3.4.0 release, as soon as humanly possible, probably next week, a week and a half from now, maybe even 2 weeks from now, depending on how things go. We're shooting for mid-May. It may drag out depending on how QA goes. The nice thing about having Rap7 behind the project now is we actually have QA. So we'll talk more about kind of how that's affected the project, but for the most part, things mostly work now when we do a release, as opposed to me spending my weekend testing it before going back to work again. So it's nice to be able to do this stuff full time. So just a quick review of some of the things that we've come up with so far. Since Metasploit was acquired, we put out 3.3, 3.3.1, 3.3.2, 3.3.3, and now soon 3.4. Almost 100 new exploits in 3.3 was released in October. Now 3.3 was mostly a release that was just after the acquisition, so Rap7 didn't have, we hadn't ramped up our development resources yet. It's mostly a community release. Since then, we've done 100 exploits, which is actually more than we've ever done in that same period of time through the history of the project. And we can credit Joshua Drake for about 90 of those, so he's sitting over there being an exploit machine on idle. We've added both integration with the Nexpose vulnerability scanner, as well as Rap7 released the free version of Nexpose, which is the community edition that doesn't have any commercial restrictions, no delays on updates. If you, no matter where you work, what you do, you can, well, unless you're in Iran or Syria, you can download a copy of the community edition, set it up, run it, scan it, and it's entirely free to use as long as you want to use it. Huge updates to Interpreter. We ended up bringing Stephen Fewer on contract, who is the guy who's been working on a lot of our payload backends, and he's very happy to work on an open source project where he basically retains copyright, puts it under the BSD license, and puts it back in the public domain basically and gets paid for it. So he's really excited about the work, and we've been able to put a ton of features in the last few months just because he's been really gung-ho about working on the project. Since October, we've re-implemented the entire pivoting backend of the Metasploit Interpreter payload, so it does forward and reverse TCP and UDP now. We haven't exposed that yet in terms of like a SOC service, but it's coming soon. We rewrote the entire threading backend of Interpreter as well. So every request now runs its own background thread, which means you can do a whole lot of things more at once. You can have background downloads, background scanning, background pivoting, all sorts of great things, and it doesn't actually stuff up the main service. We added 64-bit support to Interpreter and the ability to do migration from 32-bit to 64-bit back and forth. So as you see more people switching to 64-bit platforms, and a little bit of what I talked about in the keynote yesterday, they still run 32-bit applications on top of WoW64, which is the Win64 emulation layer. The great thing about the pivoting from 32 to 64 means you can compromise the vulnerable 32-bit program, then migrate into a 64-bit program, and then take over the desktop from there. In addition, we redid the entire SSL layer behind Metasploit. So the SSL layer is much stronger than it used to be. As of last week, with the ability to do full-blown, complete staging over SSL. So even the initial connection from the payload itself coming back to us is a full SSL connection that downloads some interpreter code directly into memory and then initializes Interpreter, which does another SSL connection again. So as far as someone watching the network, unless you can man in the middle of the SSL connection, it's pure SSL from now on in that sense. So it's kind of nice. We haven't switched over from reverse TCP to the reverse HTTPS yet, but that's coming as soon as we finish some quality issues. One of the things that Josh worked on and the whole team kind of pulled through on was exploit ranking. And by pull through, I mean we cheered Josh on while he did it. Is he had to go through and rank every one of our 600 odd exploits. And he did a great job of going through and making sure that targets were reliable, automatic targets weren't set when they weren't the right target. Any exploits that had any kind of bugs or QA issues got solved during the process. We opened tickets, worked on it, cleaned it up. So the entire exploit base in Metasploit really got an overhaul the last 2 or 3 months. And the exploit rankings provide a really nice way to say, I only want to run exploits that won't crash the target, or I only want to run exploits that are guaranteed to work almost always, just because of the way they're designed. Or you can say, I want to run exploits that'll just crash things left and right because I want a shell, damn it. So however you look at it, there's a way to approach it using the exploit rankings. All the exploit changes resulted in mix-in changes, which resulted in library changes. So it really became a top-down overhaul in QA of Metasploit, going through these modules and checking them for correct behavior. We've had over 100 bugs fixed and found just since 3.3.3. And since basically 3.3, we've had something like 450 bugs fixed, and we still have about 200 more that are either user requests, tickets, suggestions, and a couple cases just pure bugs left to close out before 3.4.0.
And now we're announcing 3.4, which is all the fun stuff. So I mentioned it before, but Meterpreter had a huge update round, bidirectional T-spin UDP, socket relays, and then now threading in the back end.